Hi, this is Dr. Angie, and we're doing notebook art journaling using wet media today as part of my blog series on heartsetcare.wordpress.com. And I'm using just a standard, it happens to be college rule, subject spiral notebook, 70 sheets, that you can get really cheap during the back to school sales at the beginning of every school year. So this probably cost me about 15 cents, and then I just decorated the cover, and it's my notebook art journal. And I'm going to take you from start to finish, so you have an idea of what to do. From start to finish, a art journal page. Here's one that's completed that you saw on the in the blog, or that you will see, and we're going to do one together. So I use a sheet behind this because it will bleed through unless you prime it first, and we're not priming it first. I'm going to start with a layout because I want to show you that you can use anything to lay out your art journal layout, your art journal page. You don't have to just rely on your hands, and this is a place where you get to express yourself, but I think a lot of us, like me, might be intimidated by something new. And this was new for me a few years ago. Although I always kept a journal, I never kept, quote unquote, an art journal. So this is kind of a new concept where I'm focusing more on my creativity and less on chronicling, and take a diary type of format to my journaling experiences. So no further ado, you can grab like whatever you have handy to make shapes, layout shapes for your page. And I think it's really cool when you overlap them. And what I like about the notebook is that you have the lines to guide your writing. And this is great because I think a blank page without any lines can be quite intimidating if you're not comfortable writing on a blank sheet such as this. And it'll help you with your lettering if you're concerned about that, because I think everybody wants their things to look pretty. I mean, I know I do. Alright, so you want to make sure the gesso is completely dry before you put anything on here. See, it's a little crunchy there. I have, since you can barely see the layout, I had done before, which is okay because I wanted to show you how you could lay things out. You can do what I did before and trace your whatever you have available. I'm going to show, now that this is gessoed, where I'm going to demonstrate using inks, spray inks. This is by Dilutions. I'm not sure who else creates spray inks, but you can actually make your own. I don't have one handy, but you could take an old marker and alcohol and put it in a spray bottle. You can buy spray bottles at any dollar store or at an art supply store. I think there's one right here. Here's one I made. I used this one from a cheap green, I don't know if you can see in there, but there's the marker, inside a marker there's a, I hate to have to open up a marker, but you can open up a marker and it has this, the ink inside, the spongy, I don't know what it's called. And then you put it in the bottle with some alcohol and just let it saturate at least overnight. And then you get a pigment. You might be able to use other things. I will do some research, and then maybe you can. Then I would encourage you to Google it, Google search it, or some other search engine, and or go to Pinterest and see if they have homemade spray inks. Okay, so with my homemade spray ink, I'm going to show you. Because I got it all over me. Now let's see how this compares to a brand name ink spray. Homemade, brand name. Just different color, really. The color I used for the Dilutions ink is called Cut Grass Green. And so I would say that the only difference is the color. In fact, I think this dried faster. But okay, so I also have I made these. This was an old invitation that I liked the border, so I made that into a stencil. I made this stencil. I'm going to stick this up here. There's no reason why you couldn't use, this is some liquid watercolor, or you could use liquid craft paint. Again, with your sponge. Yeah, it's funny, I think about all the things that you can use, and I was going to keep it simple and just use a brush, but you can use your sponge or a brush, and I think I would prefer to use a brush because of the way I'm going to use it. So let me grab one of my cheap brushes. So you could use a sponge brush, or you can use, I'm just going to kind of paint around it a little bit. Kind of like drawing around it, but this is, there you go. Yeah, so this is the craft acrylic paint, the craft paint that you use to the stencil brush with. You can use, I like using watercolor. And what I do with watercolors, this was a cheap palette. I think I got it for $6. They range from $5 to $10, $10 at the most on the high end. At a craft store. Just get one with all the colors and play with them. And you want to spray them down with water. And then with whatever brush you have handy. In this instance, I would use brush because sponges don't really work. They absorb too much of the pigment of the watercolor. Watercolor is kind of like a pasty white chalk that is stained, and what happens when you wet it down, it allows you to move the substrate around, and then it dries again to almost a chalky type substance. So I'm going to grab, I think, let's make that, what do I want to do?
Blue.
Blue. Good suggestion. Thank you, studio audience. Mr. Rick. Mr. Rick is my my videographer today, and I'm very grateful for him to help me out. He's also my husband. So I'm gonna just put some blue right in here. I also have liquid watercolor, which I love because it is just so. Notice how the watercolor's not sticking to the acrylic. That's because the acrylic, or the ink actually, that's ink. It's giving it some it's giving it a little bit of resistance. Isn't that pretty? So I kind of like that effect. So we are experimenting. I'll make this all pink. I have a magenta here. Wipe some of it off as you go. So you have because when you go back and write, you want to be able to see what, depending, okay, thinking as I go. You want to be able to see what you write. If you're using black ink on this dark, you won't see it, but you can use white ink in the dark areas. So for the, I'm going to put yellow in here. And I don't have much yellow here, so I have a yellow palette here that I need to spray down with water. Let it sit for a moment. And the other thing is you can use acrylic paints. Like I showed you, you can use the craft acrylic paints this way, which is a liquid. Or you can get, this is flow acrylic, and I have big bottles only because I use it a lot. You can get smaller, or you could get tubed acrylics. This is a nice basic acrylic, and it's very thick. Now, you want to make sure when you're working with this in your art journal, it's transparent. If it's, if you want anything to show through. Because some of these are transparent and some are opaque, which means it's not see-through. Transparent is see-through. Good thing to put your acrylic on. You can see that's a little bit thicker than this flow one I'm about to use. Okay, but not much. So this is a little bit more like toothpaste, and that's just a little bit wet. So like I said, I was going to use let's compare the watercolor to the acrylic. So the watercolor is definitely going to be transparent, and all watercolors dry lighter, and acrylics dry darker. So if you're looking to do light, there's a lot of information you get that I can, my paintbrush was not clean. So much about, from experience, just using these for years, I've learned a lot of stuff. So here's the watercolor, and you can see how light it is. and I think it's not really absorbing into our primer, into the paper too well. And that's because of the, I just realized that the gesso kind of does resist watercolor. So if you want to use watercolor, you're going to want to make sure you glue sheets down. And I went ahead and glued 3 sheets, which makes a nice thickness. That's an ideal thickness for your art journal page. So that's what the watercolor does. It should dry, but it's resisting a little bit. Now I'm going to get the acrylic. And what I should do is wipe the brush. Clean the brush and grab the acrylic. Look at that. You can see, if you wet it down a little bit, it's going to be transparent. That's kind of pretty. So I'm going to put a little bit of blue up here. Mix it with the yellow and get a pretty green. And to keep it with paper, you can dilute. When you're working on paper, you can dilute your acrylics with water. However, if you're working on canvas, you're going to want to use another substance called Flow Aid, which allows you to thin out your acrylics. But that's another day. We're doing art journals, I wouldn't even worry about it. But just FYI. Flow Aid dilutes it, but it also, acrylic paints have a plastic in it, and the plastic is what adheres to the canvas. If you dilute it with water, it will start to crack and will peel off your canvas. It won't peel off paper because paper is super porous, and it will stain into the paper. But on canvas and on wood and other substrates, that does not hold true. The acrylic is what holds it, glues. The acrylic is what glues it down to your canvas or to your wood or to whatever substrate you're doing besides paper. Okay? But we're working in art journals, and art journals is usually paper. We can go to a whole chapter on how you can use fabric as an art journal or quilting journal, but I'm not a fabric artist, but I'm sure you can find fabric journals out there in the internet world. So that's not my area of expertise, but it's out there if that's something you'd like to try and experiment with, if you're more of somebody who likes to work with fabric. Now, that being said, you can sew paper together, which makes a very interesting texture in your art journal. So you could take thread and needle, or you can even take this to the sewing machine and thread some things into it, which is really neat. Okay, so now we have some paint down. So we talked about using wet. Now you can also glue things into your art journal. Lighten up and relax. And discover. It says mobile experience, but I'm going to use the word experience because I think it's good to experience. I'm just going to cut it a little bit. So, if you have magazines laying about that you already read and ready to discard, go through it, pick out some things that talk to you, pictures and words, and save a folder of them. I used an old card box to keep a few. You can use a plastic sleeve or a box and these make nice things to add to your what I call ephemera. to your art journal without going to any expense of buying things. You can buy all kinds of cool stuff, but I would encourage you to make stuff or find what you have. Because I think the art journal experience you do real well by using things that mean something to you, like tickets to the movies that you went to that you enjoyed, or a napkin from a dinner party that you didn't, that had a pretty pattern. You can use that. Old cards, and whatever comes to mind, whatever you have handy that kind of reminds you of an experience, I would use it. Or something that is just, that you find aesthetically pleasing or beautiful, use it. It doesn't even have to be paper. It can be something of fabric, some natural materials. You could probably even put flowers of petals. I've put petals of flowers in mine before. You can use netting to give it texture, yarn, threads. The possibilities are really endless. But today I have magazine clippings that we can use. I'm just going to glue these down, and I'm going to do it, I can use tacky glue. I'm thinking a glue stick. Okay. So this says lighten up and relax, and it's kind of in that pretty shade of orange. So I'm going to put it down here in the blue area. And this says discover, which I think would look nice here. And this is kind of in between. Discover, experience, lighten up, and relax. So if you put glue down, put it on both on the page and on the item that you're adhering down. You know what? I think I'm doing right side up, wrong side down. I was doing it the wrong way. Oh well, it is what it is. So it's upside down for somebody going through it for me, and it's right side up for you, but notice the holes here should have been on this side. That's okay.